Warning, the following podcast will contain spoilers for a lot of the films we'll be discussing. Listener discretion is advised. Howdy folks, Jamboree here and welcome to Film Chums. Joining me is my co-host Viva.
Hi everybody!
So yeah, how's your October been going?
It's been going great. Very, very busy with projects. Unfortunately, I won't be plugging them and no one will hear them because they're internal. But, yeah, going good. And I watched some great Halloween animated movies, which is what we were going to talk about.
Yes, that's right. We're going to be asking the question, can animated horror movies be scary? I really want to draw people's attention to this genre of animation because I feel like not many people either know it exists or have their own assumptions of what it would be like. Because the instant you say, hey, animated horror film, and like, what, Nightmare Before Christmas, Alvin the Chipmunks, Meet the Wolfman? No, there's legit scary ones out there as well. There's a decent selection, but it's criminally low. Like, there should be way more out there. And I think that is definitely affecting people's perception of the genre as well, because they probably think, oh, well, is that it? And there should be more, and I get why it's difficult to convince studios to make something like this, particularly in Hollywood, because of the reputation of animation. The other thing I've noticed is that anytime there is an animated horror film that comes out, it's usually, and it's for adults, it's usually a comedy. It usually leans way more to comedy, and it's not supposed to be scary. Like, it just takes the aesthetics of horror and turns into a satire or something like that, like Hell and Back or The Haunted World of Super El Beasto. Are there any animated movies that you grew up with that scared you as a kid?
Both of them are Miyazaki movies. Neither of them are supposed to be horror movies. But I was pretty scared by Spirited Away. Like, I was sweating and I was really jumpy for days after, but it was just a constant feeling of anxiety and nervousness and stuff throughout the movie because it really plays on like the everyday fear of being a kid in a dangerous world for a kid.
It's kind of a cruel place, the bathhouse. There's not many people for Chihiro to turn to, and sometimes you can't fully trust those people too. So I get what you mean. And then you've got No Face, who is quite terrifying, especially when he starts eating people and they become a part of him, and he just becomes this huge mass of stuff.
Yeah.
And like, he's quite imposing, especially when you've got that wonderful shot where it's just like a small Chihiro and a gigantic No Face.
Yeah, the world is really well defined, and so they make it feel really big. And just the movie is constantly like this kid has to learn how to do new stuff to make it, and she has to figure out how to do this by herself, which is, as a kid, doing stuff by yourself can be scary, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I think that's one of the major principles of horror, is making the main character feel alone and like helpless.
The other one, this was more like an actual horror movie feeling, like, oh man, that monster's scary. Princess Mononoke. The tentacles that infect people and pop out of them, that's pretty scary. There is body parts freaking flying off because the guy's got super strength. He's freaking shooting off heads and stuff. There are the angry gods of the forest, which are huge animals, and they've got magic, and they're all like, we're gonna kill people, we're gonna kill humans. It's just kind of a dark world in general, and the humans are kind of gray, and the animals are huge, and they are chasing humans through the forest and like breaking trees and stuff.
I think what's so disturbing about it is that it's way more adult compared to other Ghibli movies. And if you were to marathon all their films and you got to Mononoke, you would notice right away that this is not for kids. And it's quite striking to see a studio that's renowned for being wholesome and pretty harmless overall, because they're known for their slice of life fantasies, and you start to see legitimately intimidating spirits that make the spirits in Spirited Away look cute. So like, yeah, I do get what you mean.
I think, okay, listen, this is just more of a general thing about animated horror movies. But you have to make it good, you have to let go of the idea that it can't be scary because it has to be for kids. I mean, the idea that animated movies have to be for kids is kind of one of the big things that stops animated horror movies from being made here.
Definitely.
In the US, like, at all. You know, horror movies that are just supposed to be scary. Those two Studio Ghibli movies, they understand that they want to make a movie that's for a younger audience. They play on themes that would be scarier for a younger audience to make it scary, and they are not making it for kids because they think it has to be for kids. They're making it for kids because they want it to be for kids.
Yeah, and the thing is that a lot of children are interested in horror. There's a perception that, like, all kids are the same, all of them are scared easily, let's not bother making anything too intense for them whatsoever. And the thing is, my best friend's daughter, Evie, loves horror so much. She really does adore it, and she seeks it, and she likes to watch my horror films as well. And as long as it's suitable for them, and the parent approves, there really is no harm. And there are films out there that it's almost like the building blocks for a junior horror fan, like different films to work kids up towards the stuff they're ready for. But for me, in terms of animated films that scared me as a kid, not really any that were made for kids. Anything that was like directed towards kids in general didn't scare me. It was only stuff aimed at adults that would scare me, which was very frustrating for a kid that was into horror. I remember the first time an animated film scared me was Ninja Scroll, and it's not particularly a horror film. It's more of this period action movie. And I remember just when I got the DVD, my mum bought the DVD from like a game shop. That was the only place you could get anime back then. And I saw clips, and I was absolutely terrified because it had a storyline to do with some kind of plagues. He had all these like terrifying images of that. But the thing that really got to me was there was a part where like a massive monster just tore off this man's arms and drank blood from the arms. I was 15 when I saw that, and I think it's because I've barely seen anything like that before. I was like really shocked, really taken back. But that was the only time when I was younger that something animated frightened me. It was really difficult to get to that point, and then the next day my mum had to embarrassingly return the DVD. But I've now rewatched that movie, and I own it on DVD. So I've conquered my demons.
What about something that wasn't animated?
Candyman. Candyman is but again, my parents were very strict about 18 movies. We were not allowed to watch them, or even 15 movies. We were lucky enough to see 12s. So it was very, very, very rare for me to see a horror movie. I'd have to go to a friend's house, and a friend introduced me to Candyman, and I was like, turn it off. I was not used to this kind of film, but I know another side of me was kind of like, I want to see more.
Because I think that besides the whole animated films are for kids thing, another one of the big issues that I see with trying to do an animated horror movie is that you have to try and draw something that's scary, and you have to draw it in a simple enough way that you can animate it.
But at the same time, I feel like animation does have a big advantage over live action too. and this is something that the director of Perfect Blue, Satoshi Kon, has even covered before in interviews, is that animation has a very different frame rate compared to live action, and so it can hold on things more. You can see the details of certain things more, and that can not only make gore more visceral, but also certain character emotions more striking. I feel like you can exaggerate more with animation, and obviously there's a line before he starts to get silly, but you have that freedom. You have that freedom to reach a certain level of uncanny valley that live action can't. But yeah, speaking of children's horror, there's some good starters, but I feel like I want to highlight ones that genuinely try to scare kids. Because there are animated Halloween specials, yeah, sure, but that's really very accessible for kids and really easy to introduce to children. When they're at a certain age, I feel like they're ready for the slightly darker stuff, and I think a good example of this is Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Have you seen this one?
No, but I know the reputation.
Yes. So, for those of you who don't know, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is a children's horror film that takes quite a lot of risks. And not just for a Scooby-Doo movie, but for children's movies in general. For adults, it's not that scary. But when you're watching it, you're kind of like, hey, hang on, is this really for kids? There are some very unsettling scenes, particularly with transformations, and the actual zombie designs are quite intense and intimidating for a children's movie. It takes actual risks, and it builds an atmosphere. Yeah, and again, it's like the whole Studio Ghibli film. You're so used to this franchise being pretty harmless and wholesome that you don't expect it to go that direction.
This is the first Scooby-Doo like mystery thing where the monster is real, right?
Yes,
yeah.
That's another reason why it struck a chord with people back then, especially kids. No one was expecting that. They were so used to it being this masked criminal that when Fred takes off a zombie's head, it just pops off. I can imagine the first time watching something like that, especially if you're really attached to the Scooby-Doo franchise, that's quite shocking. It definitely takes you back. Obviously, straight-to-video Scooby-Doo movies from then on would have that theme of forget about the masked character and just go for it. It's going to be real. We'll do it from now on. But that was the first one that was like, right, we're doing this shit. It's going to be real zombies and they're going to be terrified. But it's not just that, though, because the whole backstory for the villains is quite harsh and cruel. And again, you're kind of like, wait, what? They allowed this? That level of dark? Because basically, what happened was there was a group of settlers in Louisiana, and pirates forced them to walk into the river and die. And they showed this in the film. They show this. You actually watch it happening. And as revenge, two of the settlers that survived put a curse on the pirates, but they also put a curse on themselves, and they turn into werecats, and they need every millennium they need to have some kind of life force drained. It's kind of complicated, but at the same time, I really respect the film for going, you know what, it's for kids, but kids kind of like to be scared, and they go full steam ahead with that idea.
Yeah, I mean, definitely being respectful of your target audience and trying to understand them is very helpful when you're trying to manipulate their emotions with movie.
You don't want to underestimate them, but you also don't want to overestimate them. You've got to find that fine line. Because, there are going to be kids out there that want that scare, they want that adrenaline, they're after it, but you've also got to be responsible and remember, okay, you don't want to give them nightmares.
I'm just imagining, little baby James watching Scooby-Doo pounding pixie sticks, double fisting pixie sticks, oh, I need the rush.
I did.
I need the adrenaline.
I was after proper scares, and I was always disappointed because nearly half the stuff I was watching was not scary. I think another very good example of introducing kids to horror would be most stuff from Laika, and I don't just mean their horror products, because also even their like non-horror stuff has scary moments in it.
What's your top example?
Like Cooper and the Two Strings, that is not a horror film. That's definitely not a horror film.
Mm-hmm.
But there's those, I think they're twins or something.
Oh yeah, the sisters.
Some kind of, yeah, twin sister ghost things, and like they're quite terrifying. I can imagine kids being creeped out by them. But like, yeah, I get the impression that Leica really love to do children's horror.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, like that's one of their major comfort zones. And even when they tread into another genre, they're kind of like, well, can we have at least one scary moment?
Yeah, well, they started out with Coraline.
Yes.
So it really is like foundational to the company. They want to explore different aspects of childhood in a lot of their films, and that means exploring the whimsical stuff and also the dark stuff.
One of the things I really like about Coraline is that even as an adult, I will say that film is legitimately quite scary. I think what makes it quite creepy more than anything is that there is a lot of mystery surrounding what is going on. Something feels off, but you never know what exactly it is. And on another viewing, it's even scarier because the foreshadowing becomes way more obvious and little details carry a stronger connotation in hindsight. Like little tiny things, you're gonna, hey, hang on, that doesn't seem right. That should have been a red flag at the first time I saw it.
The thing that I like about Coraline and a lot of the scary Leica stuff in particular, and this goes back to me really liking that connection with reality so it feels more like it could actually affect me in the real world, is that it's animated, but it's not drawn, it's real. And it's kind of, I don't know how it works, but even though it's like stop motion and it's animated, it feels more like it feels more live action than something that's animated in a different way.
Yeah, it's more tangible. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do stop motion, is because it has that kind of that combination of the benefits of animation and the benefits of live action, merging them together.
And I think that's really important for someone like me that needs it or wants it to be grounded in some sort of reality, to feel kind of threatened by it. It makes Coraline scarier for me. I don't know if it would be as scary if they tried to hand draw it, even if they went like frame by frame to try and recreate it.
Could have got Junji Ito to do it.
Well,
that would be terrifying.
See, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about, is because I know that the Junji Ito animated collection was disappointing for some people because
I heard that, yeah.
The animation had to be simplified. And I know that for some people, the hand-drawn world being so obviously different and so obviously separate from real life wouldn't be an issue, but I mean, man, you would really need to be drawing something very, very scary.
Yeah, totally.
For me, to have it be hand drawn and not get that like, oh, it could come and get me in the real world, because it's a drawing. Like, there's no way to look at it and think that it's part of the same world.
Right. But like, I'd say that Coraline becomes the most unsettling once the other mother's facade fades and her minions become these like decrepit shells of who they're based on. That's when things you kind of go, it's like, for the most part, you could kind of see, hey, maybe the other mother's nice, but once it's that moment, all bets are off, all rules are away. And while things start to make more sense in the finale, because it's explained that this is all an illusion, there's still stuff that's left ambiguous. And I think it's that vagueness and those unanswered details that make the film stay with me. Like, you don't really know what the other mother is, and like their backstory. And I like that, though. Because one of the major principles of horror is leaving things unexplained, and that's what makes my skin crawl.
I think the scariest part of Coraline was like when the other kid turns around, she's like, haha, I stitched him up. And then you're like, damn, kids aren't safe in this movie. She's gonna be stitching them up.
Yeah. That's what I mean though. It's like once the other mother is found out, and she starts to abandon her whole kind of like nice persona, that's when things are gonna like that's when the twists and turns really freak me out. And the other mother again is terrifying, and she is disturbingly reminiscent of real narcissistic parents. There are mums like this. That's what is, to me, probably out of everything in the film, that's what scares me the most, is this really sad and tragic reminder that there are parents like that out there. Even though they don't look like that, they have that same mentality.
Yeah. I think that's an important comparison between Laika's film that seems like it would be the most horror-oriented one, which is Paranorman. For me, at least, the themes of that movie are a lot less kind of individually scary. They're more of just like a kind of social theme, and it really makes the movie less scary than Coraline, even though the main kid is like a horror fan, and it's got all these trappings of like horror movies and there's zombies and stuff.
Yeah, I've noticed Paranorman, especially compared to Coraline, is that it leans way more towards comedy than horror.
Yeah.
But it's still gallows humor because it's got jokes that stem from dead people, rotting corpses, spirits, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so. Even though it's got more of that kind of stuff, I mean, in Coraline, all of the melting stuff is actually just, it's not really like a rotting corpse. It's like sand or something.
Yeah.
So even though Paranorman's got more of that, it's got like the zombies, it's got like actual blood and guts and stuff. The theming of it is less horror oriented. Not the theming. The underlying message, I guess. What the movie's driving towards is less horror oriented, so it's really not as scary.
Well, yeah, that's for the zombies themselves aren't scary. They might frighten very small kids. But it makes sense why they're kind of unthreatening, because they're part of a curse, and they're haunted by guilt, and they just want their souls to fade away in peace. And you can't have that kind of sympathy if the zombies are too scary. You're not going to feel sorry for them if they're trying way too hard to be terrifying. Like I mentioned early on, when it comes to kids being introduced to horror, it's a stepping ladder, and I feel like if you wanted to introduce kids to like a horror, Paranorman before Coraline, it's like a almost like a test, a little taste of like, ooh, am I going to like this kind of aesthetic?
How long am I gonna have to sleep with my kid after I show them this film?
Yeah. But I think that Paranorman's real horror comes from Agatha's trial and execution, because it's rooted in historical fact, and it's quite disturbing seeing a child being sentenced to death by authority figures, the people that are supposed to be looking after her. I feel like that's the moment where it's like, that feels sickening, that feels wrong. That's where I'm the most disturbed, more than the actual zombies. And I think that's the point, though. That is the point.
It's not scary to individual person because the theme isn't saying something. You know, you don't hear that theme and be like, oh no, the Salem witch people are going to come get me right now.
Well, the thing is, I know that most people who click this podcast are going to be adults, and they want to know a bit more about mature animated horror movies. Films that don't worry about kids watching. They're for the 18-plus crowd.
Most of the ones that are actually being serious and trying to be scary mainly are gonna be anime.
Yes, a lot. It is mainly anime, and the most iconic one, the one that it comes to a lot of people's minds, and the one that nearly everyone has done a video essay on, is Perfect Blue. It's your first time seeing this film, right?
Yes, it is. I've seen the video essays. I have not seen the film, but now I've seen the film.
It's like film snob level 2. Doom. Okay, for those of you who don't know, Perfect Blue is about a Japanese pop idol who quits her idol group of Cham to become a serious actress. But after making this decision, she starts doing things that she later regrets, begins seeing hallucinations that resemble her past, and is being stalked by one of her fans called Me Mania, who is very angry that she's left Cham, and has started doing acting and modelling gigs that go against her wholesome, innocent J-pop persona. So what was your experience like?
It was very interesting. It definitely seemed to me, it seemed very horror movie-like. You know, regular horror movie, like the live-action kind of horror movie that you would be used to in the United States. Because, one, the story couldn't happen if everybody in the story wasn't stupid. And two, they use a lot of really unfair filmmaking or storytelling techniques to try and trick you into not knowing what's going on.
How so?
Here's a good indication of whether or not you're going to like the movie and be scared by it, or if you're going to be annoyed by the movie and think it's cheap. Do you get annoyed in horror movies when they make something scary happen, and then right at the scary part they're like, haha, it was a dream the whole time? Because that shit happens all the time.
It does, but it's got a point. It's the unreliable narrative, and it's in favour of the point of the film, which is shared psychosis and mass illusion between the different characters, and you're meant to kind of not only empathize with Mima, but also her descent into madness. You're meant to feel that with her at the same time. I totally get how frustrating it is. Like, you will start to hate the director the further it goes on, particularly in the finale, but it's not doing it for no reason. It is trying to say something about not just Mima's mental illness, but also her agency as a woman, and her relationship with her past as an idol, and trying to adapt to becoming a more mature actress.
They say those things, but I don't think that they sufficiently explain them or back them up in the themes and storytelling of the movie. I mean, they do the thing where it's all a dream over and over and over again. And that could be the mental illness kind of thing, but they don't really explain her mental illness, and it just goes away at the end of the movie for no reason.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of division about the ending. I'm still uncertain how I feel about the ending, if I'm honest. But for me personally, what I connect to is the parasocial horror more than anything when it comes to Perfect Blue, particularly since becoming a YouTube personality. Rewatching it as a YouTuber, it's even more terrifying, because what it's trying to say is timeless. It is a timeless. Yeah, the technology is very 90s, but what it's saying about fans' relationships with celebrities and the connections that are made through the internet, it's still completely relevant. And there's just little moments in Perfect Blue that hit me in a way that just gives me the shivers. It really does. It really freaks me out.
Well, I really liked when I thought it was going that direction at the beginning. I was super on board when the letter explodes on the set. I stopped being, or I was liking it less and less as the movie went on, after they started adding in the supernatural ghost stuff.
Ghost stuff?
Ghost
it's more of a
stuff.
It's more of a mental thing more than anything. There's nothing supernatural. Like I mentioned with the topic of shared psychosis, it's a real thing. It's when someone's mental illness kind of like seeps into someone else's. It does happen. It's not the film's not bullshitting. It's something that does literally happen.
Okay, but they don't ever say that. They just say, "Oh, these two people have split personality disorder."
Again, I'm not a psychologist or therapist, so I can't really say. But very much what Mima's going through is a doubt of identity and an uncertainty of who she is once making the transition of singer to actress, especially when she's got all these people around her telling her what she is, or the public's perception of her. More than anything, it's about her being really uncertain and scared about who she is.
Well, if they wanted to push the shared psychosis thing and people around her telling her what to do, then they should have shown the people around her actually telling her what to do. Because they try to hide who the actual evil person is by having her be like, oh, whatever she feels like is fine. Whatever she wants to do is fine. And that doesn't really, give you the feeling like, oh, this person's craziness is just being forced on this poor woman and giving her this psychosis, and she doesn't know what to do because everyone around her is telling her. Because she says what she wants to do. She makes her own decisions in the movie.
She does, but it's also important to remember two things. First of all, mental manipulation can be incredibly powerful, regardless of how mature or how intelligent you are. And I say that as a survivor of domestic abuse. Secondly, you have to take Japanese culture into account. Not just in how the Japanese idol industry is renowned for being way too manipulative and controlling, but also, and take this with a pinch of salt because I'm a white guy and I've never been to Japan, but apparently it is quite taboo to be very direct about how you feel. So Mima's behavior does make sense.
Maybe. I think that for me, and I think our split on it is really just personally what scares us in the movie. I am scared by I'm scared by really cheap stuff, so if it's they make it really gory and they do loud noises, yeah, I'm scared, okay? But if you're trying to do a good enjoyable horror movie where you work and you make it scary from the themes, I'm scared of stuff that could actually happen. If it seems like it's grounded in reality, that's more scary. And I'm less scared by the house has got a ghost in it. It's just this house though.
Again though, I wouldn't say Perfect Blue is a supernatural film. And I would say it even resonates with a lot of things that really do happen, particularly with celebrity stalking, like the Bjork stalker or the Madonna stalker. Those ones have really stayed with me.
But it wasn't even a real stalker. It was a crazy guy that the evil person hired. Listen, I just think it would be more realistic and more scary if instead of being oh, surprise, at the end, it's just there was this one evil person and the girl was crazy and everyone around them was stupid. And that's why all this stuff happened. It would be more scary if it actually happened because she had this fan base and there were multiple people and they were actually stalkers. And it wasn't just this one person. If the evil turned out to actually be the fan base being evil and all those pressures you're talking about, then yeah, that would be pretty scary. But I think the end and just the way they executed it for me, it was giving me more there's one evil person and everyone is stupid vibes. And I'm not saying I did enjoy watching the movie. It was a fun watch. I liked it. I thought that the atmosphere they created was ominous. I just felt at the end when they revealed everything, I was disappointed with the reveal. And when you actually think about the story and how they told it to you, you're oh yeah, they cheated a lot to try and hide what was actually going on.
But we were mentioning how one of the biggest gateways to adult horror is anime.
Yeah.
And say that, but there's not that many, and the problem you will have when you're trying to look for anime horror movies is there may be the trap of, oh, this is based on an anime that I haven't seen before, so I'm not going to get the film. Or it's a hentai.
Great.
And you probably don't want that. It's fine if that's your jam, but if you're after a legit scary horror film, films like Legend of the Overfiend, Wicked City, and Demon City Shinjuku, stay away from those. But one of the first important horror anime films was Vampire Hunter D. It's very important because in the grand scheme of anime history, along with Akira, it helped put anime cinema on the map in the West, and it showed that the medium could be aimed at older audiences. But it's really corny and schlocky when you look back at it in hindsight. It's kind of like a 1950s B movie, but without the same charm. It's quite boring, even though it's really cheesy and campy. It could have been like just this fun schlocky movie, but it's not, because it mistakes painfully drawn out pacing for atmosphere building. It's got choppy, limited animation, and it doesn't take the time to explore its futuristic setting. The villain mainly spends most of his time sat on a throne. Yes, he's this powerful and almost invincible vampire, but he doesn't even seem that interested in the story he's in, and his motive is just he's horny.
So you weren't scared?
No, there's a scene where the vampire hunter D goes for like a cave and there's all these monsters. That's a little creepy, because again, I don't like anime horror monsters. They freak me the hell out. They really do. Like they put like an intense level of detail into them, and their frame rate is like 2. And it just shakes me the wrong way. But because the film is just so boring and so corny, it has a terrible 80s English dub, and the color scheme doesn't fit a horror film. You don't get the proper thrill from an anime horror that you usually would. And it's a shame, because like there's some interesting stuff there, and it could have been scary, but most of the film is just characters banging on about wanting nobility, and it's just dull. But I say that, but they made a sequel called Bloodlust, and it's like night and day. It's such a massive improvement. It's like right away you can tell that the animation has drastically upped its game, thanks to like technical advancements and a bigger budget. It's just a beautiful movie. It really is. It's just so grandiose. And it takes all the ideas and the themes of the first film and just does it better. Just anything you could think that the first film was trying to do, it just does it so much better. Because like the first Vampire Hunter D is really bad at building its world. You haven't got a bloody clue what it's supposed to be, what kind of world it's supposed to be like. While Bloodlust manages to successfully combine the aesthetics of Bavarian luxury with the dystopia of a Mad Max movie and creates this incredible vision. Nothing seems off, and it's just so unique.
So you're saying start with Bloodlust?
Yes, you can. That's the thing, you can.
Yeah.
You can totally do that, because it does work on its own.
What's the central theme?
It's kind of got it adopts the same themes as the original, like loneliness and the apocalypse and stuff like that, and how people feel in that sort of world, and the jobs they have to adapt to. But I feel like this one does it better, because they know how to use dialogue better. Like when a character talks, it means something. It comes off as poetic, but not in a pretentious way. They can say like the simplest line. It sounds beautifully written, but it means something, and you get a complete idea of what that character's supposed to be like.
So would you say that it's more of the kind of scary movie where you just feel uncomfy throughout, or is it more of like a scary movie where it surprises you with like a couple big scares, and it makes you jumpy for a while after?
I don't think it's even scary.
Okay.
If I'm honest.
Okay, James. We're talking about animated horror movies.
Okay, well, the thing is, it's still in the horror genre.
It's more like gothic poem, like
Yes.
Edgar Allan Poe. Like it's horror, but it's like the poem isn't
Absolutely.
really scary. Like, come on.
It is. It's more than anything. It's just a horror atmosphere. Like you won't get scared, but you get the fun of like a gothic classic novel. That it's got the feel of one, and that's what's so charming about it, I think. And it's what's lacking in the original. But yeah, we bring up anime about trying to find animated horror films that are generally scary, but I feel like you could go around the world and you could see different, well, not physically, but like there are films from around the world in general that will treat animation with respect and know that it can be scary. For example, European animated cinema is renowned for not worrying about commercial viability, rules, or audience expectations, so it's no surprise that they've made some out there stuff, hence why we ended up with a film like Fears of the Dark. I would recommend this to anyone at all. Probably not very young kids, but like it's awesome. It's this French horror anthology. And you'd expect there'd be way more of these, like animated horror anthologies. There should be tons of them everywhere. Like, there's so much potential with them. I don't know why there isn't more, but like this is one of them. It's black and white, and it's a great example of like animation being legitimately terrifying. And it takes advantage of both the animation and the black and white color palette. Like, we're constantly guessing what the hell we're even looking at half the time, because it's playing around with the lighting of the black and the white, and the animation styles will utilize their inherent traits to freak you the hell out.
Is there like a specific one?
The thing is that I'd say all of them in that anthology are pretty solid. There's none in there that I feel like that's not scary enough, or that's not good enough for this anthology. They're all pretty solid stories, and they're all about different kinds of fears too. So even if one doesn't scare you, another one will, because it taps into so many different kinds of phobias and fears.
Mm-hmm. And they're all mostly riding on like the art style being weird.
Like I said, the animation's justified.
Mm-hmm.
It uses it in a way, in a quirky way, yes, but in a way where you could only do it through animation. I don't think you could have made that film in live action at all. No way, 100%. The other way you can find animated horror films is by looking for feature-length adaptations of horror video games. Sometimes a horror video game franchise will be so successful that they will make a movie out of it. More often than not, actually, it's part of the product. They will actually make it at the same time, and it's there to promote the game. Things like Dante's Inferno, the Resident Evil animated films like Vendetta, Damnation, and Degeneration. The one I want to talk about, though, is Dead Space Downfall. Now, I've never played the Dead Space games, ever. I'm terrible at games in general. But I still had a lot of fun with this one. It's like The Thing meets Alien. Which, yeah, it's not that original, but it's just a well-executed sci-fi horror and action movie. And, like, the monsters themselves are quite horrifying, because there's no hesitation to show how violent and destructive they are. They're kind of like the zombies from 28 Days Later. You know what? It's like the first Vampire Hunter D, because it reminds me of a B movie, but this time I mean that as a compliment, because it has the charm and appeal of a fun Z-grade horror movie. And I will admit that a part of me feels like you kind of need to play the games to get into it a bit more, but even though that was the case, I still enjoyed myself. So if you want just a fun horror alien movie that's animated, go for this one. Yeah. Oh, what's funny as well is that most of the cast are made up of a lot of voice actors you recognize from children's cartoons.
Okay.
Like, most of the cast are like, there's like Jeff Bennett, Grey Griffin, Jim Cummings, like everyone you associate with like the most wholesome characters are voicing these much more adult, mature characters who swear and scream, and like if you close your eyes, you can hear familiar characters just saying these things.
Okay, destruction of childhood. We'll just add that.
It will destroy your childhood.
So it sounds like out of the ones that we've seen, that would be like, if you are looking for the kind of horror movie that's just like a fun kind of gore fest, you would recommend Dead Space.
Totally. Dead Space Downfall is... I've not seen Aftermath, but Downfall I would really recommend to people, whether you've played the games or not. You just want a fun, gory, sci-fi action horror movie that's kind of creepy sometimes, kind of atmospheric sometimes, but for the most part is just entertaining. Watch it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, folks.
Thanks, everybody. I hope you all go out, and now that you know the secrets of making an actually good animated horror movie, make some, because there's only like 10.
yeah, just make them, yeah. And like, again, they're a hit or miss collection, so we need more. We need more ones that are actually really, really good, that proves that it can be done more. We hope that you have a very spooky Halloween.
I want to be like, Happy Halloween, and you're gonna edit it so that it's echoey, and then there's like a howling of a wolf or something at the end, and then bats fly across the screen.
Nah, I'm just gonna leave it like that.
Gosh.
You look crazy.
I just want to do something special for everybody. James doesn't want to celebrate the holiday. Okay.